I'm Saskia and I'm professor at Columbia University in New York. Today I'm just very honored to do this talk. I'm delighted the center exists. I think this is an extraordinarily timely innovation to bring this in, because one feature of how the economy has worked and how politicians have enabled that economy is to have destroyed civic tissue, destroyed stuff that kept modest families and poorish neighborhoods feeling that they are also part of this society. There has been an enormous amount of ruptures, and I call these expulsions. And it works for me on several vectors. It's not just the people question. It's also the biosphere, the whole environmental question. And I just want to enable the audience, basically, with understanding some of the logics at work. These are logics of power that cause vast destructions and thereby engender the need to develop a civil society agenda. And there are many places around the world who have understood that, and I think they should network among themselves, because it is a vast subject. So I want to run mostly looking at the West, but also the global South a bit, about some of the dynamics that have brought on these destructions. There is a narrative structure to these dynamics, so it's not just a question of formulas and numbers. One can understand high finance, but you cannot understand it if a financier tells you what high finance is about. You can understand something about growing poverty if it is not simply an economist who is looking through complex abstract models at how an economic system works. So my intention is to really enable people to develop speech. My fantasy is always that they can talk about it over dinner. It's a bit of a fantasy. I asked the question, what is the steam engine of our epoch? As a way, a device, if you want, to center our mind, on very foundational dynamics that have enormous reverberations. It is not a descriptive sort of total situation. It is what are these very powerful dynamics that are shaping and reshaping where we're at. And so high finance is one of them, to be distinguished from banking. Secondly, I look at this notion of the steam engine of our epoch to understand the amount of destructions, the amount of poverty, how the modest middle classes have lost ground. I mean, how can we explain that? So, and I argue finally that the question of inequality is basically a distribution. We have always had inequality. So the question really perhaps becomes, yes, inequality. I doubt that in complex systems that we're going to get rid of inequality. But what we can aspire to is that everybody feels that they are part of the system, that they are needed, that they do matter. One of the subjects I'm working on now is I want to recover a category that is a very complex category, which is territory, which today functions as an invitation not to think. That often happens with powerful categories. And I want to make it work analytically, which means extracting it from its single embedded meaning, which is the national state, the nation-state territory. The reason I'm interested is that territory is not ground, it's not space, it's not terrain, it's not land. It's actually not fully material. It has embedded logics of power, which in our Western modernity achieved their most splendid form, if you want, in the working liberal state. And it has embedded logics of claim-making, again, which in our Western modernity took on the form of citizenship, Western-style citizenship. So I want to see what happens when I deploy this category as a window to understand a variety of situations. So, for instance, the global city is a kind of territory that is neither fully of the national, nor is it fully of the global. It has its own conditionalities. What I was saying before about people increasingly being expelled from the civic tissue, say, of a city, too many poor people, too many middle classes who are in shock at losing so much ground, sort of that they are paralyzed middle class, modest middle classes. And in a way, I want to see how do we get them to feel that they are claim makers and that there are embedded logics of power that they can contest or ask from, etc. So it's a kind of a theoretical exercise, but I think it will have empirical applications because it's a way of seeing that doesn't reduce the situation to the citizen, the neglected citizen, the impoverished citizen, being reduced to asking for help from the state, but rather the citizen is one component, critical component of the territorial. So that is my next project.